Ava Mitchell stood at the kitchen counter in their Lincoln Park apartment on a warm September evening in 2014, her hands trembling slightly as she chopped vegetables for dinner. Ryan Hayes burst through the door with his trademark grin and wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, planting a soft kiss on her neck. She turned and smiled at him, trying to push away the knot forming in her stomach as she heard familiar footsteps approaching. Connor Bradley appeared in the doorway, holding a six-pack of beer, his presence always feeling like an uninvited shadow in her sanctuary. Ryan clapped his best friend on the back with genuine affection, the kind of brotherhood that had survived since their freshman dorm days at the University of Michigan. Ava forced herself to smile brightly, as she always did, masking the tension that coiled in her chest whenever Connor entered their space. The memory of that night 10 years ago flashed through her mind, unbidden and unwelcome. She had been wearing a red dress at that fraternity party just 3 months before she and Ryan made things official. Connor had cornered her in a dimly lit hallway, his breath heavy with whiskey and something darker. He grabbed her face and kissed her hard, his hands sliding down her body in ways that made her skin crawl. She shoved him away with all her strength and ran, stumbling through the crowd with tears streaming down her face. The next morning, she told herself it was nothing, just a drunken mistake that meant nothing in the grand scheme of things. Ryan had been so happy introducing her to Connor officially the following week, talking about how his two favorite people would get along perfectly. She buried the incident deep, convincing herself that revealing it would only destroy the friendship Ryan treasured most. Now, watching Ryan and Connor laugh together over some inside joke from college, Ava felt that familiar wave of guilt wash over her. This lesson haunts victims of unwanted advances daily, and the weight of silence often becomes heavier than the truth itself.
5 years into their marriage, Ava sat in their new suburban home in Naperville, cradling their newborn daughter Lily in her arms. Ryan was in the backyard, setting up for a barbecue, with Connor helping him arrange chairs and test the new grill they had bought last month. She watched through the window as the two men worked together seamlessly, like they always had since their college days. Connor looked up and caught her eye through the glass, giving her that knowing smile that always made her stomach turn. She quickly looked away, focusing on Lily's tiny fingers wrapped around her thumb. This perfect, innocent life they had created together. The doorbell rang, and more friends arrived, filling their home with laughter and the smell of grilled burgers and freshly cut grass. Connor approached her later in the kitchen, standing too close as he reached past her for a beer from the cooler. His hand brushed against her lower back, lingering just a moment too long, and she stiffened at his touch. Ryan appeared suddenly, asking if she needed help with the potato salad, completely oblivious to the tension radiating from her body. She painted on her practiced smile and told him everything was fine, just like she had done 1,000 times before. That night, after everyone left, Ryan collapsed onto the couch, pulling her close and sighing contentedly. About what a perfect day it had been. Ava nodded against his chest, feeling the weight of her secret pressing down on her ribs, making it hard to breathe properly. She wanted to tell him right then and there, but the words stuck in her throat like shards of broken glass. How could she explain 10 years of silence without making everything worse than it already was in her tormented mind? The fear of losing him, of watching his world crumble, kept her mouth shut once again, as it always did. This pattern reveals how victims often protect their abusers by staying silent, believing wrongly that time heals wounds. It only allows to fester.
10 years after that terrible night, Ava stood at another family barbecue in July 2024, watching Lily chase butterflies in the backyard. Connor was there, as always, now with a girlfriend named Jessica, who seemed sweet and completely unaware of the man she was dating. Ryan was manning the grill, telling stories about their Michigan days, his face lit up with nostalgia and brotherhood that seemed unshakable. Ava felt Connor's eyes on her constantly that day, following her movements as she set out plates and refilled drinks for their guests. He cornered her by the fence when Ryan went inside to grab more ice, his voice low as he asked if she remembered their little secret. Her blood ran cold, and she stepped back quickly, telling him to stay away from her and never speak of it again. Connor smirked and walked away, leaving her trembling with rage and fear that had been building for an entire decade of pretending. That night, after putting Lily to bed, Ava couldn't hold it in anymore, and the dam finally broke inside her chest. She found Ryan reading in their bedroom and asked him to sit down because she had something important to tell him finally. His expression shifted from curious to concerned as he saw the tears streaming down her face and the way her hands were shaking. She told him everything about the party, about Connor forcing himself on her, about the 10 years of silence she had carried alone. Ryan's face went through a dozen emotions in seconds, ranging from confusion to disbelief to the anger she had rarely seen before. He asked her why she hadn't told him immediately, why she had let Connor into their lives, their home, around their daughter. Ava tried to explain through her tears that she was scared and ashamed, that she thought she was protecting what they had built. But Ryan stood up and paced the room, running his hands through his hair as betrayal colored every feature on his face. He said the words that cut deeper than any knife ever could, telling her that her loyalty had never been real or honest. How could she claim to love him while hiding something so fundamental for 10 entire years of their marriage and friendship? This moment shows the devastating cost of silence and how trauma victims often sacrifice their own truth to protect others who may not deserve it. Ryan moved into the guest room that same night, refusing to sleep beside her or even look at her for more than a few seconds. Ava lay awake in their empty bed, staring at the ceiling as guilt and regret consumed every thought racing through her exhausted mind. The next morning, she tried to talk to him, but he brushed past her, grabbing his briefcase and leaving without breakfast or goodbye. Lily noticed immediately, asking why Daddy seemed sad and why Mommy's eyes were so red and puffy from crying all night. Ava forced herself to smile and told their daughter that grown-ups sometimes have disagreements, but everything would be okay soon, hopefully. Days turned into weeks of icy silence between them, with Ryan barely speaking except about logistics concerning Lily's school schedule and meals. He stopped coming home for dinner, instead working late or going to the gym, anything to avoid being in the same room with her. Ava tried writing him letters, leaving them on his pillow, explaining her fear and shame, but he never responded to a single one. She called him one evening, begging him to go to counseling with her, to work through this together like they always had. Ryan's voice on the phone was cold and distant as he told her he needed space to process what felt like a complete betrayal. He said he didn't know if he could ever trust her again, because real partners don't hide fundamental truths for an entire decade. The worst part was understanding that he was right, and that her silence had created a wound that might never fully heal between them. 2 weeks later, Ryan packed a suitcase and told her he was moving to a hotel downtown until he figured out what he wanted. Ava watched him leave, feeling like her entire world was crumbling around her feet in slow, agonizing motion. She sat on their front porch that night, wondering if protecting his friendship had cost her the only love she had ever truly known. This demonstrates how well-intentioned silence can become a prison, and how avoiding difficult conversations often creates far worse consequences than facing them would have. 3 weeks after Ryan left, Ava sat alone in their living room, scrolling through old photos on her phone of happier times. Lily asked every night when Daddy was coming home, and each time, Ava had no answer that would satisfy her daughter's innocent questions. Ryan finally agreed to meet her at a coffee shop near his office, a neutral territory where they could talk without the weight of their home. She arrived early, her hands shaking as she rehearsed what she wanted to say about her regret and the fear that had silenced her. Ryan walked in, looking tired and older somehow, as if the pain of the last month had aged him beyond his 32 years. They sat across from each other in awkward silence until Ava spoke first, admitting that her silence had been the worst mistake of her life. She explained through tears that she had been a scared 21-year-old who convinced herself that time would erase what Connor did. Ryan listened without interrupting, his jaw tight as she detailed every moment of guilt and every time she had wanted to tell him. He finally spoke, saying he understood her fear, but that their marriage had been built on a foundation with a crack she had hidden. The betrayal wasn't just about Connor's actions, but about her choosing to let that man remain in their lives around their daughter for years. Ava nodded, knowing he was right, and that no amount of apologizing could undo the decade of deception, no matter how well-intentioned. Ryan admitted he had confronted Connor, who denied everything at first, then minimized it as a drunken moment that meant nothing significant. He had ended their friendship immediately, telling Connor to never contact him or his family again after 20 years of supposed brotherhood. But the damage between Ryan and Ava remained, a chasm that felt impossible to cross, despite the love that still existed underneath the pain. Ryan said he needed more time to decide if forgiveness was possible and if trust could ever be rebuilt from these broken pieces. Ava left that coffee shop knowing she might lose everything because she had tried to protect him from a truth he deserved to know. She drove home alone, realizing silence might feel like protection, but it always becomes poison in relationships built on honesty and vulnerability. The lesson here cuts deep because trauma survivors often carry shame that isn't theirs to bear, and silence protects perpetrators while destroying innocent bonds. True loyalty means trusting your partner with difficult truths, even when fear screams to stay quiet, because love without honesty is just a beautiful lie.